this morning I want to talk to us about the fact that wins just don't happen. Wins just don't happen. You don't accidentally stumble up on a win. Wins are something that there's a prelude to winning. There's a preparation phase. Winning is a mindset. It's learning to think like someone who wins. It's positioning. You ever heard somebody say, hey, you need to get your mind right? You ever heard of that? Why? Because, man, if my mind's not right, nothing else is going to be right. And it's all about preparation and getting our minds right and getting ourselves postured properly internally in our thinking is such a huge aspect to winning what God has already won for us. It's so significant. It's so important. Guys, and I can't think of a better place to spend the next few weeks in the book of Joshua, because we have to understand the New Testament and the New Testament reality that we live in because of Jesus is built on principles in the New Testament. But when we look back at the Old Testament, we see those principles lived out in pictures. Does that make sense? The Old Testament is communicated to us in pictures, in historical accounts of what God's people dealt with in life. Those pictures in the Old Testament become principles in the New Testament by which we live our lives. The Old Testament is a foreshadowing. It's as if you're in a dark room and somebody opens this door and there's a bright light on the inside of that room and someone's about to walk through the door. What's the first thing you see in this room? Their shadow, right? You see a foreshadowing. You see a little shape. You see a little bit of definition. You can see a little bit of what's to come. That's what the Old Testament is. It gives us a picture of what was coming to us in the full substance of Jesus. Do we understand? It gives us a picture of what Christ is going to do for us when he shows up on the scene. And so these Old Testament pictures and these Old Testament stories really paint a picture for us and really become living illustrations for us of what walking in a New Testament relationship can look like. It's such a powerful principle for us. And so there's nowhere like looking at the story of the children of Israel. I mean, we could even go as far back of them in slavery in Egypt, and God sending Moses to them. And he goes to Pharaoh and says, God says, let my people go. And they go back and forth. And after a lot of challenging things God allows to come upon the Egyptians, Pharaoh finally says, fine, get out of here. Y'all leave. Matter of fact, just don't leave. We're going to send you with all the loot you want. I mean, just plunder the place on your way out. Just get out. Because this is killing us, literally. And so then we see the picture, we see the reality of them moving on their way, not just to the promised land, but on their way to actually meet with God. You know, God's first instruction wasn't, hey, let my people go so they can go to a promised land. It was, let my people go so they can come out into the wilderness and they can worship me. He understood that any of the promises and the wins that they would experience in life had to be predicated on the fact that they first knew him. He wanted them, listen, he wanted their lives to first be defined by their relationship to him, not by winning some promise that he had already made to them. And so we have to understand just from that knowing him is the most important thing. That's why here at Life Center, and I hope some of you have participated in that. We've had at least 1 week already of prayer and fasting that started on Monday, where we just prayed and spent some time before the Lord this week saying, listen, what do you want to do in my life? I want my relationship with you to grow. I want my relationship with you to be stronger. We'll carry that forward tomorrow. There'll be another Facebook Live video with somebody else on the team just there coaching us through and praying with us and giving us prayer points that can carry us through this week as we continue in prayer and fasting together. But listen, all winning that we experience in life has to be predicated on the relationship that we have with him. We have to know him. We have to know him. And we could carry the story of these people forward and all their ups and downs and all of this. But we finally get to Joshua chapter 1. And it's such, the book of Joshua, it starts incredibly interesting. We're going to try to unpack just the first 3 verses today if we can. But there's a lot here, and there's a lot going on. But it's significant for us if we're going to really learn what it means to win in 2018. This is what the Bible says in Joshua 1:1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Wow, what a greeting. It wasn't, hey Joshua, how you doing, man? Listen, I've got some news for you. You need to sit down over here. Your mentor, the guy, you've kind of been his number 2, the guy who's been the primary leader for you and all these people. He brought you guys out of slavery. You've been following him for 40 plus years. Listen, I just need to let you know something. He's dead. Are you going to be okay? I mean, I just love how God cut to the chase. Moses is dead, Joshua. Now, therefore, arise. Go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread, I've given you, as I said to Moses. We're going to kind of work backwards this morning. Is that okay? Look at this promise that God gave Joshua. Verse 3, every place that the sole of your foot will tread, I have given you. Guys, if we have to understand that any winning, as we, hashtag we win 18, that any winning we experience is simply because that God has already made it available to us. The winning we'll do this year won't simply be based on something that we self-generate. This is not a self-help message. This is a God-dependent message. And so here we see God speaking to Joshua. And he's saying, listen, I've given it to you. But what you and the people have to do, really to win, is you have to possess what I've already done. Everything I've already made available for you, the win is in your cooperation. The win is in you making a decision and making a choice to get up and to pursue what I've already promised and made available to you. See, he's telling them, guys, you don't have to go win it, but the win is in you receiving what I've already won. Do we understand that? See, there's a lot of people looking for wins in life, and they're going to this seminar and that seminar and watching this on TV and reading this book, and they're talking to everybody they know, and they've tried everything just to get their marriage to work, to get their finances to work, to get their relationship with their kids right, to try to somehow find a way to maneuver and to experience a better life. But the reality is this, guys, he's already done everything necessary for us. Here's the New Testament principle. The New Testament principle is in where Peter wrote that God has already given us everything that we need for life and godliness. Everything that you need in order to receive the wins he has for you this year, he's already done. And it's already in you if you have a relationship with Jesus. See, the challenge is this. The challenge is when people who have a relationship with God, they have a relationship with Jesus, they've said yes to him, but nobody's ever taught them what that means, and two, what all has been made available to them through that relationship. Or they've been taught, but they just didn't listen and they forgot it, or they never applied it. Listen, the proof that we've been taught isn't me nodding my head saying, yeah, that's great. The proof is in the application. Why do you think teachers give tests in school? Because I may have stood up here at the smart board and taught little Johnny, and he may have sat there and nodded his head, but if he's bombing the test, he didn't learn it, right? So we have to understand that everything that you need and everything that you and I need for #WeWin18 to become fleshed out in a reality in our lives is because of everything that Christ Jesus has already done for us. It's what we've already sang this morning. You make me brave. The courage that I need, you provide that. You're the one who walked through every wall. You've dealt with the shame. You've dealt with the issues. You've dealt with everything that internally and externally that was working against my life. You've already dealt with it. And we have to understand that it's about, if we're going to win, winning is simply possessing what He's already done and made available for us. It starts with cooperation. It starts with cooperation. Now what I want to do is I want to go back to the beginning of Joshua 1. Because the death of Moses is significant. And there's a lot of lessons there for us to learn. Because the reality is this. If we don't let some things in our lives die, we'll never win. Some of us, the best thing that we can do in life is to have some funerals. Some of us need to allow God, like He did with Moses. See, what happened was this. Moses and God went for a walk. Only God came back. We need to allow God to put His hand on some things in our lives, and we need to be willing to release those things to Him so that the only thing we continue to see in our lives is Him and not the issues. Moses represented so much to these people. We have to realize that it's been over 40 years since He led them out of Egyptian slavery. 40 years we know they spent wandering in the wilderness because of their own unbelief. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. And here they are. He got them right to the threshold, right to the doorstep. He got them steps away from this promised land, this life that God intended for them to have. He got them right to the threshold of it. Matter of fact, they could see it. They could look right across the river, and there it was. Everything, what God has promised us, bam, it's right there. I mean, they're thinking, I can almost touch it. I can almost taste the milk and the honey, right? I mean, you ever been at that point in your life where you feel like that win? Maybe it was in your marriage or in a relationship or in your business or in your work or maybe in just your own emotions. You felt like it was so close you could almost taste it. If you could just reach out, it was just almost right there in front of you. It was so close, but yet it was still so far away. Moses got them there. Listen, he represented them coming out of Egyptian slavery. You remember, he's the guy that saw the burning bush and listened to God and threw his staff down and it turned into a snake and he picked it up and became a staff again. He was the guy who had the courage to go back into Egypt, you know, as a former convict, to go back into Egypt and to speak and to allow God to begin to work these things out. It was through Moses that the law was given. It was Moses that went up on the mountain with the fire and the smoke and the lightning and came down with God's word to the people. It was Moses who God gave all these instructions to of how the people were to come and worship. It was Moses that had led them through so many challenging times and through so many challenging moments. And now he was dead. He represented so much that was good. Some writers have suggested that the reason that why God took Moses and God took a walk and only God came back and the assumption is that God just somehow dealt with Moses' dead body was because if it had been up to the children of Israel, they would have almost made a shrine to him. And they would have never moved on. Guys, let me ask you this morning, what are some good things in your life? See, we don't have a problem. We all want the depression to go. We all want the shame to go. We all want the hurt to go. We all want the painful things to go. But what are some good things in your life that if you're not willing to even release them, you'll still never get a win? See, there's some good things. There's some things that may have been good in the last season of your life. There may have been some things that were really good 3 years ago, but God's trying to progress you forward. See, we have to understand that the kingdom of God is a kingdom of progress. That God is a God of activity. He's always moving. The Bible talks about He moves us from faith to faith, from strength to strength, from glory to glory. But our tendency is we experience something that's better than what we previously knew. And so this must be all there is, and we stay there. And guys, the first question we have to ask ourselves today is, what are the good things that we may need to release to God in order so that He can bring us into His best? In my life, that's like some things that I thought I knew and I understood. Listen, there were some mindsets and there were some belief systems that were great then, but they're not working now. There were some attitudes that were okay then, but they're not cutting it now. There's some people that were okay in that season, but in this season, nah, there's got to be a change. Come on, somebody. Why? Because it's not, listen, it's not just the what we call the bad stuff that keeps us from winning. Sometimes it's good stuff, but the God's no longer in it. Listen, we have to, listen guys, the picture is this. The children of Israel were in Egypt because God led them there to get them from a famine. Egypt didn't start out as a place of slavery. It started out as a place of salvation for them. But listen, it became a place of slavery when they stayed too long. Last year's blessing, thank God for it, but it needs to stay in last year. Because I don't need to let last year's blessing to keep me from receiving what He has for me this year. Because when that happens, what was a blessing is now a prison. I've got to be able to shift. I've got to be able to change. And in order for that to happen, sometimes I've got to let some good things go so that He can bring me into something better. Y'all believe that? The people in Joshua, at this moment, they had been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. Why? Well, it started primarily in Numbers chapter 13 because of the people's sin and really because of their insecurities. We know in Numbers chapter 13 that Moses has led the children of Israel. They're finally there at the doorstep of the promised land, and some of you may know the story. Moses says, okay, we're going to send some spies in. We're going to get some guys. We're going to get some guys from every tribe. They're going to represent all of us, and we're going to send them in. And these guys are going to go in, and they're going to come back, and they're going to give us a report on the land. And they're going to let us know about this land that we're about to go in and possess. They're going to get a snapshot and a picture of the win that God has for us, that He's already given us. He said it's yours. He's promised it to us. He said it belongs to you. He's already done it. He is He has given us his word that it is ours. Now what we need to do is just send some guys in who can come back and tell us what to expect. And so they send these guys in, and in Numbers chapter 13, verse 25, it says this, and they returned from spying out the land after 40 days. Now they departed and came back to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the children of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. So here these guys, these spies, they've gone out. They're coming back with a report. They just didn't come back with a report. They came back like show and tell. You know, here's fruit, man. Here's examples of what's waiting for us. This is what the wind's going to look like, guys. Isn't that awesome? Then they told him and said, we went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Wow. It's everything that God said it was. It's a good win. It's a good win. It's everything that God promised us. Then, verse 28, nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites dwell in the mountains. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and all along the banks of the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it. Verse 31, but, some of us need to deal with our buts. The men who had gone up with him said, we're not able to go up against the people. They're stronger than we are. And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw giants. And we are like grasshoppers, listen, in our own. Somebody say, in our own. We are like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we are in their sight. Spies, representatives, these leaders, they go out, they come back, they bring fruit. They say it's everything God said it was. But the challenge is this. These people have been out of slavery by this point for a little while. These people were there. These same spies, listen, they were there when God sent the plagues. They were there. They were probably some of the main ones helping to carry out the loot of Egypt. But the problem is this: they were. Let me keep going. They were there. They saw God's presence descend on the mountain. They saw the tabernacle. They saw Moses and Aaron going and coming from the tabernacle and the glory of God and His presence. They saw God do everything that He told them that He would do. Every step. They saw every miracle along the way. They saw it all. They experienced all of it. But they still thought like slaves. They still thought like slaves. Their own insecurities and their own inferiority complex just didn't keep them, but kept the whole people out of God's promise for 40 years. See, we just sang a song. I sat down during worship and I thought, yeah, I need to write this down. See, one way that they thought like slaves, people who think that way, they always think somebody's out to get them. They think somebody's always out to get me. It's rigged. It's rigged. The system's rigged. My boss is out to get me. My spouse is out to get me. She out to get my money. You know, somebody's always out there. Somebody's going to do me wrong. And we think like that, and we don't believe anything good because we're so conditioned to being told one thing and then being let down. You see, because think about it, if you'd been a slave your whole life and that's all you had known for at least the last 300 years of your people and their life, you'd be so used to people making promises and never coming through. Okay, well, we're not going to work you so hard today. No, we changed our mind. Get out there and build me another pyramid. Think about it. And so, listen, they had no trust of authority. And I'm not just talking about the authority they could see. They didn't even trust God's authority because somewhere in their mindset and somewhere in their thinking, they're thinking, this God, yeah, He's made promises. Yeah, it's everything He said it was. But somehow He's still setting us up to fail. He's somehow setting me up to fail. And the reality is this, it didn't really have anything to do with who He was. The problem is it had everything to do with how they viewed themselves. See, because they could never truly get a revelation and understanding of His greatness and His faithfulness and His trustworthiness. Why? Because every time they tried to view Him, they looked at Him through the lens of their own inferiority. And so then when they find themselves walking in the land He's promised them, seeing everything, the wind is right there for them to take. They can't take it. Because there's giants. There's things there that are bigger than we are. There's issues that we're going to have to confront that I just don't think we can confront. See, because the promised land for them, you remember I told you the Old Testament is about pictures? The promised land for them in the Old Testament is the promised life for us in the New Testament. What was a land for them is a life for us. And there's things that God has promised us. There's things that God's put in your heart. Some of you spend an entire week praying and fasting. God, what do you want me to believe you for this year? Strengthen my relationship, and what are the things you want me to believe you for this year that you've already provided that I've just got to align myself to so we can walk in a winning way. But guys, the reality is this, we'll never walk in that winning way if we don't learn to think differently. I mean, they never even bothered to comprehend, well, you know, we went and we spied the whole land out. We were there for 40 days. Nobody messed with us. We're all alive. We're still breathing. We were able to walk out. They didn't even think about the evidence. Why? Because they were so small on the inside. And in this life that God's promised us in, the wins that He has for you this year, you're going to have to confront some things that you may not want to have to confront. And that was their issue. They didn't want to confront the stuff that needed to be confronted in order for them to win what He'd already given them. They didn't believe that God had already won it. Their their insecurities and their inferiorities talked them into unbelief. Guys, the question of our lives isn't how do we feel about it. The real question is, what do we believe about it? I thought Hope did a great job with the offering. She said, you know, courage isn't the absence of fear, but it really is when there's fear, but yet you go anyway. Guys, it's not about how you feel. At the end of the day, how you feel doesn't matter. It's what you believe. Your feelings can be all over the map. You listen, these spies, they could have come back, listen, and been like Caleb and said, you know what, we're fearful. This is a big ask. This is not going to be easy. This is going to be a challenge. There's a lot there that's intimidating. But be of good courage. If God said we can do it, we can do it. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging the problem. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging that something's wrong. God's not wanting us to live in a state of denial. And the facts are there. There's giants. It's scary. Oh my goodness. Those are facts. But what is not true, they believe the lie of their own insecurities, that we're like little grasshoppers. They viewed themselves, they diminished who they were. Let me tell you something. Some of us in this room, you come from a religious background, and that religious background is always trying to make people humble. You just got to be humble. We got to be humble. And we have such a poor view of ourselves. And this is what happens. You get around somebody who has confidence of who they are in Christ Jesus, and we think they're arrogant, and we think they're cocky, and it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with the fact that they don't view themselves like a grasshopper. For some of us, we have to change, right? For some of us, we would begin to win at a new level this year if we would just begin to change and shift that. They had a poor little old me concept. Well, it's just little old me down here just trying to do the best for Jesus, and I just don't know how, but, I just don't know how. I'm just going to try to do the best I can, and one day I hope when I die, I get through them pearly gates and meet St. Peter and get my cabin in the corner of glory, bless God. That's a grasshopper mentality. Just a few more weary days, and then we're just going to fly out of here, bless God. When Gabriel toots, I'm going to scoot. That's a grasshopper mentality. If we think that way, we'll never walk in the courage to confront the giants of culture. We'll never have the courage to confront the giants of racism. We'll never have the courage to confront the giants of poverty. We'll never have the courage to confront the giants of injustice. We'll never have the courage to confront the giants that plague our cities and our communities. We'll never have the courage to confront the giants that plague us. The shame, the insecurity, the fear that dwells on the inside of us. And we'll never win out there if we don't learn to win where? In here. You're greater than you think you are. You're bigger than you think you are. There's more in you than you think there is. Listen, talking about winning. The greatest thing a coach can do for his team is to help them not just believe, but know and discover and release what's on the inside of them. I don't care what you can talk to a coach at every level, from little league all the way to the professional league, and they'll tell you the same thing. If I can just help my players realize there's more in them than they think there is, then they'll win more. You know what? You have a Father who's filled you with His Spirit. The same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead lives in you if you're a follower, if you've surrendered your life to Jesus. Listen, all the power of God dwells on the inside of you. He's given you everything you need for life and godliness. It's in you. There's more in you than you think there is. Well, my childhood, my mama beat me, my daddy left me, you just don't know, alcoholic parents, this and that. Okay, listen, everybody's got a past. Everybody's had pain. Nobody's had a perfect life. Everybody's had struggles. Well, I was abused, I was molested. So were the other 50% of the people in the room. But at some point, we have to stop looking at God and looking at the wins through the lens of all of the dysfunction, because when we do, we minimize ourselves. He's saying, you're my son. You're my daughter. There's greatness in you because I'm in you. And when you dumb yourself down, it's an expression of unbelief in me. I have faith in God. Listen, if you really have faith in God, then you won't minimize who you are. People who really have faith in God don't dumb themselves down. That doesn't mean they're arrogant. That doesn't mean they're cocky. That doesn't mean they're obnoxious. But if you really have faith in God, then you don't look at yourself with a grasshopper mentality. So because of that, all the spies who had a negative report died. Joshua and Caleb were the only two spared because they came back with some faith. The Bible says they had a different spirit about them. But because of that, the whole nation, and because the nation bought into it, instead of stepping into the wind, they spent 40 years going around the same issues over and over and over again. There's too many people who've been brought out of slavery. You've said yes to Jesus. His blood's washed you. You're a son, you're a daughter, you're a child of God. But because we will not allow Him to empower us to confront the issues in us that need to be confronted in us, we find ourselves going around the same stuff over and over and over. For some of us, the win in 18 is just to see that cycle end. For some of us, that's what the win needs to look like. But in order for that to happen, we have to change the way we think, which will change our perspectives and our perceptions. It's powerful. The other issue in Joshua 1:1, well, we have to understand also that Moses was the last person of that generation to die. And so you had a whole nother generation of this nation who, can you imagine this? We'll get God's best when grandmama dies. That was their reality. They had to wait on the former generation, all of them, to die in the wilderness before the new generation could go in and receive what the old past generation was too afraid and too insecure to pursue. Imagine that being your life. We'll get God's best when all these people die in my life. Hey, I hear a bus. You should go stand in front of it. I love you, but, just. Is that a herd of camels? Maybe you should just run out there. Moses was the last to go. And for Moses, this was a very real thing because just 7 chapters later in Numbers chapter 20, we see some of Moses' issues come to the scene. Because, listen, God wasn't going to keep Moses out of the promised land until Numbers chapter 20. See, initially, Joshua, Caleb, and Moses, they were still all going in. Until Numbers 20, verses 1 through 13 says this. Then the children of Israel, the whole congregation, came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month, and the people stayed in Kadesh. And Miriam died there and was buried there. Miriam was Moses' sister. This was his older sister. She was the one that put him in the basket and sent him down the river to help save his life. She had been a pretty major voice and major force in his life and in helping him lead the people. So he's dealing with loss. He's dealing with grief. Personally, that's a huge hit to him. Now there was no water for the congregation. So his sister's dead. They've had her funeral. and now everybody's thirsty because it's parched and dry. So they gathered together against Moses and Aaron, and the people contended with Moses and spoke, saying, if only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. Imagine that. Why have you brought up the assembly of the Lord into this wilderness that we and our animals should die here? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? See, they think they're accusing Moses, but they're really not. They're accusing God. Because, you know, what they were forgetting is that it was still a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night that led them. See, they were forgetting all that. See, in their accusations against Moses, they were really accusing God. See, we do that, don't we? We get in a tough spot and we get mad at God, but it's easier to attack the pastor. It's easier to attack the leader. It's easier to attack our boss. It's easier to attack the government. It's easier to attack everybody. But the reality is we're just really mad at God. We're just mad at God, but we're taking it out on everybody else around us. I'll leave that alone. You may be too late. I may have already stepped in it. It is not a place of grains or figs or vines or pomegranates, nor is there any water to drink. You know, this isn't what you promised us. Well, the truth is, 7 chapters earlier, if they hadn't believed the report of the lying, insecure spies, they could have been having what he promised them. So Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle of meeting, and they fell on their faces. Good for them. And the glory of the Lord appeared to them. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, gather the congregation together, speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock and give drink to the congregation and their animals. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded him. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock, and he said to them, hear now, you rebels. Moses is mad. Moses has had enough. Moses is fed up. He's done. Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me, to hallow me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. Powerful. See, the challenge with Moses was this, is Moses had an anger problem. Think about Moses' life. You know, he's born into chaos. He's born into a family of slaves. Pharaoh decides that the population of the Jews is getting too great, so we're going to start killing all the male children 2 years of age and younger. Moses' mother does the only thing she knows to do. She puts him in a basket, sends him down the river. By God's providence and grace, he ends up being raised in the courts of Pharaoh as an adopted son and grandson. It's an amazing story. But how many of us realize that there's emotional wounds that come with that? My mom didn't want me. Yes, she was trying to save my life, but still she didn't want me. To then always be raised in the house of Pharaoh, not really Egyptian, not really a Jew. Where do I fit? What's my real identity? Think about all the inner questions this guy had. Think of all the buildup of rage and anger. I don't fit here, and nor do I fit there. Think about the psychology of Moses. Think of the unresolved issues in him. And then we see it spilling over. One day he sees an Egyptian beating on a Jew. What does he do? He goes and kills the Egyptian, buries him. I mean, he just let it all out right there, didn't he, guys? Moses has anger problems. Moses has some unresolved issues in his own life. Moses had some things he needed God to heal. And so we see it every so often he would pop. Every so often he would just snap. And he gets to this point in time. The people aren't going in, but Moses is going in. Until he lets his issue get the best of him. And God says, listen, I can't, this unhealed issue in your life is going to keep you from winning what I've promised and given to you. This unresolved issue of uncontrollable anger, these outbursts, you living out your pain. God's saying, look, Moses, I told you to speak to it. I know you were angry at them, but you allowed your anger at them to become a sign of unbelief towards me. Were they difficult? Yeah. Is what you were dealing with, was your anger justifiable? Probably. But the way you demonstrated it spoke to everyone that your issue is more important to you than following my instructions. And I can't have that kind of person leading these people into a win. Moses needed to get healed. So that's why Joshua 1:1 opens up with Moses is dead. It didn't have to be that way. But Moses' unresolved inner pain, Moses' unresolved inner issues kept him from winning. It's powerful. His own sense of loss and his own frustration. Listen, guys, the unhealed issues of your life cannot lead the way into a win in 2018. The unhealed issues of your life can't lead the way. So what's the significance then in Joshua 1:1 of God coming to Joshua and saying Moses is dead? He's telling him, I've dealt with the past issues. I've dealt with the past. Could y'all come? I've dealt with the past issues. All the good stuff and all the bad stuff. Everything that kept you guys in this cycle for the past 40 years, I've dealt with it. Therefore, you and all the people arise. Arise. See, we have to understand something. That at the cross, all the issues, Jesus dealt with them. Do we understand? At the cross, Jesus dealt with them. At the cross, Jesus took on every issue that's been trying to destroy your life. At the cross, he dealt with the fear. He dealt with the insecurity. He dealt with the inferiority. He dealt with the pain. He dealt with the rejection. He dealt with the abuse. He dealt with the disease. He dealt with the poverty. He dealt with the injustice. He dealt with the unforgiveness. He dealt with all of it. He dealt with the abandonment. At the cross, he dealt with the shame and the regret. He dealt with all of it. And as he breathed his last, you know what he said? It is finished. It's done. For you and I, you know what it was? It was as if God was saying, Moses is dead. And then God spoke to Joshua and said, now therefore, you and this people arise. You know what that was? That was an invitation to a resurrection. That was resurrection for them. See, 3 days after Jesus died on the cross, the Spirit of God brought life into a dead body, and He rose from the dead, victorious over all the issues, victorious over hell, victorious over the grave, victorious over everything. Why? So He became the ultimate winner so that you and I could be winners with Him. It was all made available then. So God's conversation with Joshua, now therefore arise, you and these people. Go possess what I've given you. That was a resurrection. It was a listen, you're no longer defined by the doubt and unbelief of the past. You're no longer defined by Moses' unresolved issues. You're no longer defined by the cycle that you've been going around for 40 years. All that, none of that defines you anymore. It's time for you to win. It's time for you to win because you've been in a holding pattern and almost a losing pattern. Now, Joshua, it's time for you and these people to win. So what you've got to do, you've got to get up. You've got to get up now, not get up later. Don't think about it. Get up now. Now arise and make up your mind. Don't think like slaves. Don't think like the past generation. Don't think like of what was and what used to be. There's something different about you. And there's something different about this moment and this time. So get up and go possess what I've already given you. Guys, it's the gospel. It's the gospel. It's God through Jesus saying, I've done it all. I dealt with it all at the cross. I've risen from the dead. Now I want my Spirit to rise up on the inside of you so that you can go and possess the life that I've destined you for, and that you can not just spiritually win, but you can win in every aspect of your life. It's the gospel. But who's going to be brave enough to go for it? Because, you know, He told them, I'll read it to you in Joshua 1. I wasn't going to read this, but I will. If I can get back to Joshua. He told them in Joshua 1, so awesome. He said, every place that the sole of your foot will tread, I've given to you. Listen to this. From the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, and all the land of the Hittites, to the great sea toward the going down of the sun, so shall be your territory. Basically, He's saying, listen, I'm giving you this territory, or I'm giving you this life. And you know what? All the issues you didn't want to deal with then, they're still there. They're still there. But this time, something's going to be different. Because instead of shrinking back, you're going to rise up. Instead of choosing inferiority, you're going to stand in the confidence of who you are in relationship to me. I'm going to make you brave. I'm going to make you courageous. And you're going to go for it, and you're going to win. Let's stand together this morning. Come on. Let's worship together.